Welcome to the Ranchonomics Podcast, where we empower you to build a better ranch and transform your operations into a thriving business. I'm your host, John Haskell. Let's get started. Kyle and Kristin Marshall from the Sandhills of Nebraska. Welcome to the Ranchonomics Podcast. How are you today?
Very good.
Good.
Thank you very much for joining me today. I wanted to visit with you. We are in August of 2024, and here around us in Sheridan and Johnson counties in southeast Montana, Rosebud County, we have had some huge wildfires and lots of loss. We've had people that have lost range and feed and cattle, all kinds of things. And you guys had a fire about 18 months ago. I think it was April of last year. Is that right?
It was.
Yes.
And I wanted to visit with you guys now for a couple of reasons. One is I want you to paint a picture of where you're at, sort of grass, feed-wise, and all that has come of the fire that way. And then I want you to talk a little about the process after the fire, give some people here maybe a little bit of hope to start, but then also some instructions on how to help their case as they go forward. So again, welcome. Thank you for joining me, and maybe introduce yourselves.
Okay. I am Kyle Marshall, and this is Kristin, my wife, and we've been here at this ranch at Burwell, Nebraska since 2002. Kristin actually grew up here on the place. And then after we were married, we were away for a few years, and then we came back here in 2002. And we've been running the place and doing our own thing with it since about 2004.
The Sandhills do periodically get some big fires through there. Now, you guys usually get fires in the winter time, right? Or in kind of the spring and fall, right?
I suppose we grow a lot of grass in the summer, especially if it rains. So we've got a lot of dry, tall, standing grass standing throughout the fall and winter if we don't get a lot of snow. And then the year that we had our fire, we had quite a bit of snow early, and then it got really dry that spring. And so it was just a tinderbox. The day that the fire happened, it was about 90 degrees in April here. There was a strong, strong south wind. And what happened was a controlled burn on a neighbor's place became an uncontrolled burn. It ran about 6 miles, I think, before they got it put out. Took out about 1,000 acres of our place. Basically, our whole west side, our place is split by the highway here, and it basically took out all the grass on the west side. They saved our place, house and yard and stuff.
Yeah.
And the tree belts and stuff around it, but we lost all the grass and pretty much all the fences on all that side of the place. So, yeah.
Pretty devastating loss. You do some custom grazing, so you normally bring cattle in, right? They're about May.
Correct.
That basically wiped out a significant portion of your summer income, correct?
It did. We were very fortunate that we didn't have the livestock on the place yet. We didn't have to deal with that. I just can't imagine how bad it would have been if we'd had cattle here. I'd just finished making grazing plans for the year, and we had contracts already in place and knew what we were looking at for the year. At that point, we were hoping it would start raining because we were dry. And I think I had decided to cut back just a little bit because of it being dry. But yeah, I mean, all of a sudden, a third of your place burns up and there goes a third of your income for the year.
Right.
And
pretty linear relationship there, sadly. Yeah.
Yeah.
Kristin, you grew up in this country, fires of that size common. And I guess I'm curious, do you know, what was the controlled burn for? What was the purpose of that? Do you guys know?
Yeah, the controlled burn was to control the eastern red cedar problem that's really prevalent now in our area. So it was a government program that would give some financial help to control certain areas. I actually don't remember a lot of fires growing up here. It felt like you heard about fires in more drier climates, mountains. It had never felt like it was ever a real threat to me. So I don't remember ever having one really near or that big. The fires you hear about that are thousands and thousands of acres and uncontrolled, like we would have occasional lightning fires or Baylor fires, but it just felt like the scope was never that size. But it was a red flag warning day with 45-mile-an-hour winds, so that changes it.
Yep. And again, you guys usually, when it is hot in your part of the world, you're usually at least have a little green, right? Because the Sandhills has enough of a warm season component that you have green grass even through August, right?
Right. Yeah. Even this year when we're pretty dry now and it's still really green. So, yeah.
Yeah. Awesome. All right, so here's what I want to do. That's the beginning where it started. Let's jump all the way to the end. Where are you now? And then we're going to go back through the middle, because the first thing I want to make sure and do is give people some hope. These fires are absolutely devastating and exhausting when they are happening. They're horrible while you are fighting them. The immediate aftermath is usually terrible as the adrenaline kind of wears off and you hit a full realization of exactly what has happened. So tell us, what does your pasture look like now? What does your fence look like now? What has been the overall impact on your place?
Almost this whole side of the ranch has new fences on it now, which is really actually very nice. A lot of those needed replaced anyways. And so that's one thing that's super nice.
And they were basically paid for either through government programs or insurance.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. And then our grass it's just tremendous. I just can't believe how good it is.
Yeah.
And granted, it started raining about 2 weeks after our fire. And then we had a really nice wet spring and really a pretty good adequate moisture year last year. So
yeah,
we let that all sit idle for the whole year last year. We had planned to try to graze some of it, but it's just difficult without fences out there. And it took a long time to get approval to build fences and whatever. So it ended up sitting idle for the whole year. But what was cool about that was that we actually took in some of the cattle that we take in every year. We took those in early this year.
Yeah.
In April and put them on that ground.
Yeah.
When we got them off, you couldn't hardly even tell that they had been there. Yeah. And we basically got a free month at least of grazing. And it was kind of before anything really started growing anyway. And so we were able to turn the other customers' cattle out on that ground at the same time of the year that we've done it every year for him, and really see no significant drop in feed out there for them because of having all that stockpile. Plus, it was interesting over the winter. We got quite a lot of snow in January and February here. All that tall standing grass out there caught so much snow that you couldn't drive through it.
Huh.
I tried to get through it with a side-by-side. I had to stop and back up several times, and I finally gave up and just came back to the house because you couldn't do it.
Because that grass was literally catching and holding snow as it was.
All that snow.
Yeah.
So that really set us up for a good spring here too.
Okay.
Yeah, it's tremendous.
Did you get the red cedars? Did we take care of that, I hope?
There is no red cedars out there.
Perfect. Good. That's what I wanted to hear.
Yeah, maybe just 2 or 3 that the fire jumped over. But
it's a clean slate on the west side of the highway for us.
Yes, it looks really good.
Yeah, cool. Okay, so now let's go back to the middle. The beginning is horrible, right? I remember talking to you guys not very long after it happened. It was pretty devastating, pretty emotionally difficult. I know where you guys are at now, so I think we're in a really good spot now, 18 months later. Let's talk about getting through the middle. Now, I know you guys were dealing with different federal agencies, and including FSA and some insurance stuff because it was a private, started with it and it burned on private land, that sort of thing. So what do you wish you'd known at the beginning that you know now, and give us a little walkthrough on that process?
I'll let you answer some of this.
Kristin, I know, was on the phone for weeks and days with different people.
I was going to say, if you have a fire come across your land, congratulations, you have just earned yourself a new part-time job.
In all reality, that is true, correct?
Yes, it absolutely is true. That it's a huge hassle and you don't think you have time for it, but keeping records, making phone calls, and becoming an advocate for yourself, I couldn't believe how much time it took. And looking back, it really was a part-time job. I think coming up with a system, whatever that system looks like for you, notebook, audio recording, Google Doc that you just keep adding to, where you can write down conversations you have with people because your brain is on this overload mode. And so coming up with a way to capture information. I called the insurance on this day. I talked to this person at the FSA this day. Here's what I learned. I really had to become an advocate for us. At first, I was feeling a little bit guilty about that, like I'm being a victim. But the reality is there's some programs out there to help, but sometimes you have to fight to get the cooperation to take advantage of them. I had to push harder than I thought I would have to in order to get the help we needed or the help that's supposed to be there to help people in these situations. So That would be one thing for sure.
Very good. How about, did you need to get pictures of like fences that were destroyed, that sort of thing? What kind of evidence did you need to gather? Because I know there was some dispute at one point after the grass had grown back, right? There was some dispute about whether there in fact was a fence there or not, because literally everything was gone, right?
Yeah, we tried to take a fair amount of pictures at different stages. I think it's important to do that just for your own sake as well, because there are a lot of things you can't remember. So I don't know that we ever had a dispute about fences being there, but we did have to push to get the people to come actually look at every foot of the fence.
Yeah.
And I didn't do an amazing job, but trying to keep all of those pictures organized is important.
Was there anything else that was disputed or sort of difficult to prove or anything like that as it came along?
As we got farther into dealing with the neighbor's insurance company, their adjuster was really good. He said, I represent your neighbor and we take full responsibility for this. And we're going to try to pay everybody. But we really still had to advocate for what we felt like everything was worth. They didn't want to pay us anything for fences. They didn't want to pay us anything for tree belts that got burned up.
Yeah.
Some things like that. And we had put in a lot of time just assessing damage and tearing out the bad and putting back new and all that stuff. They wouldn't compensate us for any of the time either. And so we just had to go back and forth. And I visited with our own insurance agent about that just to gain some education. He encouraged us to just play the game. He said, it's just a game. And I'm not trying to throw any insurance companies under the bus, but that is how it works sometimes, right?
I don't think you're throwing them under the bus. I think anybody that's dealt with an insurance company feels the same way. Like,
right.
Is literally the point of this just to delay payment another 60 days? Like, it feels like a strategy when you're dealing with them.
Exactly right.
Whether it's true or not.
Yeah. And our insurance agent told us, he said, they are trying to settle for the least amount of money with each person that will take it the quickest. He said, just sit on it and don't be afraid to have a lawyer get involved.
Yep.
At first, we felt really bad about that idea too, because we felt like, well, that would basically like suing our neighbor. And we didn't want to do that because we're friends with them.
Yeah.
And we still have to live in the same community and want to keep a good relationship with them. But began to understand that we weren't dealing with our neighbor anymore. We were dealing with their insurance company.
Right.
And sometimes the only language that gets through is lawyer language, right?
Right.
We were almost to that point when they basically came back with a counter offer that it was quite a lot less than what we had asked for, but we felt like it was acceptable. So we just went ahead and took the offer so we didn't have to deal with it anymore. It had been over a year of dealing with the insurance company to get that settlement.
And although it was less than what you wanted, it was significantly higher than their initial offer. Correct?
Exactly.
Okay.
Yes, a lot higher.
Yeah, this is important that when you get that first offer, again, I guess I approach this more as though I am in some Middle Eastern food market, right? Where a rug market, right? No price is final here until cash actually changes hands. They come out with kind of a lowball offer. You come back with a full price offer, and then the negotiation really begins, right?
Yeah.
Good.
He kept throwing things at me like, well, there's a big company that lost a lot of property, and there's one other landowner that lost some property.
Yeah.
And I just kept saying, those two people are not my concern. My concern is with our place.
Yeah.
And what we lost. And you can deal with them later. And if you haven't heard from them, well, that's between you and them. This is between me and you.
Right.
And just to try to keep on track, because they have tactics of what they do to manipulate you or whatever. At least it feels like that. I don't know. But that's what it feels like, to manipulate you to take their low offer. And so we had to grow some thick skin and just say, no, we'll hold on to this. We're fine. I think sometimes people hurry that because they feel like they don't have the resources that they need. And unless they just take whatever is offered to them.
Yeah.
Yes, that would be one thing that I would encourage. If there's any way that you can hold on to get what you actually deserve, or close to it, then do that for sure.
Yeah, very good. Have you taken a sell-by marketing course, but still found yourself unsure of what to do when the auctioneer started talking fast and the gavel started banging? The cattle are going in and out. Suddenly you don't even know what lot you're bidding on. It's hard to evaluate the cattle, run the math while still keeping one ear on the bid price. The worst part is it's probably been a month and you still haven't taken any decisive action. We've been there, and you want to know what makes it better? Practice. But not just any practice, realistic pressured practice. This is exactly why Ranching.fyi is hosting their first strategic ranch simulation, October 28th to 30th in Gillette, Wyoming. The sim program is designed to help you start winning under pressure and to think on your feet and adapt to changing circumstances without letting time slip away. Don't miss out. Sign up today and we will see you in Gillette, Wyoming on October 28th to the 30th. Visit www.ranching.fyi before the gavel taps. All right, so that's talking about how to deal with insurance companies. Let's talk a little about dealing with FSA, because I think the process is kind of different. Is that a fair different, although also they're both maddeningly long and slow?
Yeah.
Similar in that way. How does that sound?
Yeah. I had to educate myself because oftentimes the people that work at FSA offices are thrown these programs almost as they're being announced by the government. So they don't actually always understand how they're going to work. They can't always answer your questions. They don't always know the timeline, and that's not their fault necessarily. Some of them.
Yeah.
So you have to educate yourself. You have to make phone calls and ask lots of questions. And I actually ended up having to call all of my neighbors and encourage them to take part in the program or at least express interest. Otherwise, the county committee had basically had said a verbal, we're not going to pursue this program. It was an ad hoc program. Meant there's a different process to get the funding. And so I actually had to do a lot more like legwork, just calling neighbors and saying, educating them, and then asking them to make phone calls if they were interested. And so it just took a lot of time and educating myself, and then just staying on top of them, kind of being the squeaky wheel sometimes. And continuing to make those phone calls or sending the letters or whatever, because my program and my fire was not the only thing those gals were dealing with.
Oh, yeah.
The frustrating things were sometimes I provided some of the same information probably 4 times.
Yeah.
And that was obnoxious. I don't know how to get around that, but I guess I just felt like, well, if this is what I have to do again to move this forward, I will do it again. It was a long process, and it required some face-to-face meetings, lots of phone calls, and just staying on them. And that was also not quite a year. Can't remember when we got that payment for the fence. The fire was in April 23. We finished up all of our fence in March of 24. I think it was just a year or after when we got the payment to help cover the fence. So again, like a long process and lots of patience, although I don't know that I sounded patient.
That's something important.
I don't think you have to sound patient when you're in a process that long that where you have to explain yourself 7 times.
Yeah.
One of the things that Kristin said there, I think is important too, to think about is on those programs, they don't pay you up front. You have to foot the full bill for all of the stuff that you do. And then they cut you a check after. Yes, they reimburse you after they come and approve everything. They have to inspect it and make sure that it's done to the specs that they have. And then they cut you a check after it's all approved. So that's just another thing to think about.
Good to know. Yeah. So for example, on the fence and that sort of thing, you guys are out the materials, you invoiced the labor, that sort of thing, but that all happened before you ever saw anything back.
Right.
Yeah. Okay, great. Yeah, something to plan for. Yet another reason to have a little bit of cash reserve and the little gas in the tank for when you need it for something unexpected like this, right? Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah.
All right. Sounds good. Just out of curiosity, if you were to give the whole experience a rating, 1 to 5 stars, what would you do? Would you do it again?
Wow, that's a loaded question.
It is exactly. She's thinking.
I would probably do it again because we learned a lot. We're probably in a better position ecologically, financially, emotionally. It comes and goes.
Yeah.
I would say for me, I'm not there yet.
Right.
There are days when I'm still catching, and that was something I wanted to mention. There's a lot of emotion to this that is something that is not to be ignored.
Yeah.
And however you choose to deal with that, whether it's your faith or whether it's a therapist or whether it's journaling, but there's a lot of emotion packed into all the aspects, and it would be a sad thing to live through the fire but not live through the impact emotionally. So
yeah.
But anyway, I guess I would say I probably would not change it. For one thing, I guess I just trust that the Lord brings about things in our lives for a reason. It's probably made us stronger.
Yeah. Like all adversity, right?
For sure.
Yeah.
I think one of the things that did right away when it happened was that we started just getting a hold of people that we trusted, and Dallas Mount was one of those people. Yep. I think we got a hold of you. There were several people, and we ended up having a meeting. Dallas actually flew to our place here, and we had a meeting exactly a week after the fire happened. We just assessed where we were, and then we talked about what can we do. And we did everything from look at our numbers to finances and all that stuff. But we also went out and we just looked at the ground that had burned. And we got down in the dirt and dug through it. And it was interesting to do that because you could see life coming back already a week later.
Yeah.
On the tops of these hills that had blown so bad were just charred. I think for me, that was a huge thing that really helped me mentally.
Yeah.
Was just to get out there and look and see there's still life here and this is going to be okay. It still makes me mad when I think about it, actually, when I drive through out there and I see some of the stuff that we've had to fix and it's all good and new, but it's just like, oh, why did we have to do all this? So in some ways, like you always want to avoid those things.
Yeah.
People were just like water, right? Like we want to go the path of least resistance easily, always.
Wouldn't that be nice? Yeah.
But I am thankful for the whole thing. And so how would I rate it? Gosh, I don't know. If I'd give it 5 stars, in some ways, I definitely would give it 5 stars. In other ways, I would give it maybe 1 star because it wasn't fun for sure. No, but it was really good. It was really good. Good.
Sucked in like a lot of awesome ways.
That's the most unique review I think I've ever heard. Sucked in all the right ways. Yeah, good. This is how we describe our gym membership too, right? Mm-hmm. One of the things that comes up in these often is as you get a little ways away from them, I think what we often realize is that it's never as bad as it seems in the moment, right?
Right.
Yeah.
While the fire is going on and in the immediate aftermath, which again is where a lot of people are at today, right? We probably got the fire out mostly yesterday and the day before. This is when it absolutely seems like it just is the worst right now. And we don't have any hope about the future. And like you say, when you get out, start digging around and looking at things, it's like, oh, generally these things work out okay in the end. There's some real pain in the middle, but it will be for our good ultimately.
For sure.
I think you guys are at the point 18 months out where you can see a lot of that. It may not always feel that way, but you can see the potential, right?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. This year we're stocked back to normal rates. And even with maybe just a little less rainfall than we'd like, we're still doing fine.
Yeah. Okay. So Kyle and Kristin, you guys own a fencing company and you have actually spent a fair amount of time working on fences in areas that have burned. Do you guys work in northern and eastern Wyoming?
We have not yet, but we might consider it. Who knows?
So that is one thing. Now, when a landowner contracts with a fence contractor to rebuild fence, it becomes pretty easy to get through the FSA process, correct?
Correct, because they need bills, right? So it's pretty simple to put together estimate for them, and so they at least know what they're looking at, and then when everything's done, all they've got to do is turn their final bill in and they get reimbursed off of that. So yeah, that's pretty simple.
Very good. And when you did it for yourself, you already kind of have an invoice machine up and going, but you basically just invoiced yourselves. The fencing company invoiced the ranch to make that work. And people can do that themselves also, right? But you kind of have to keep detailed records and all and make sure the labor and the materials get billed, correct?
Correct. Yes. And that's probably pretty important if you're doing everything yourself, is to remember to pay yourself, because, if you are doing it all yourself, you think you're saving a bunch of money, but at least turn in the bill for your time, because, you need to be reimbursed for that too.
Yeah. And in some cases, there is a cost share where the labor can be used as a cost share, right? But in other cases, it is a full repayment. So billing for the labor is appropriate.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay, great. All right. Well, guys, I really appreciate you joining me. I appreciate you sharing your experience. Again, you guys are over by Burwell, so you're not that far away. You probably are even breathing the smoke that's been coming out of this deal for the last week. So
yeah, it's easy here for sure.
Just downwind. Really appreciate you being able to share that experience, and I look forward to talking to you guys again here before too long. So thank you.
Yeah, thanks, John.
You bet. Thank you for tuning into the Ranchnomics podcast. We hope this episode helped you win today. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe and share it with a friend.